All right, great. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed the morning sessions. My name is Max Bayback. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Influx Medical Marketing. We are based in Los Angeles and Pasadena, to be specific, and also in Salt Lake City, where our CEO, Mr. Adam Daniels, is currently.
Hi, everyone.
My co-host here. So what we wanted to talk about today was to give some insights into what we're seeing in the digital landscape right now. It's particularly starting off with some ad trends that we're seeing for those practices that have continued to advertise, particularly for virtual consults. Obviously, that's the majority of the opportunity we're seeing at the moment. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the opportunity we see coming into May and beyond, and really where there's opportunity for practices to shift and to distinguish themselves and maybe separate themselves from the pack due to major changes that are happening right now. We put out some white papers on our website, which you can download at any time, where we've already been talking a lot about certain trends that are changing. And right now, what's happening with COVID-19 is really fast tracking some of these changes. So we're going to talk a bit about that. A couple of things that we're seeing in the advertising landscape that's interesting is, first off, a lot of times what makes the most sense in aesthetics, particularly for surgery, for elective surgery, is Google advertising. What we're seeing right now is that display ads are working even better than normal. And what we mean by display is any kind of a banner ad, and we would also include in that any kind of Facebook or Instagram ad as well, because it's not a search ad where someone is typing in a keyword and finding it. It's something where they're actually just kind of browsing on social media and then they click on it. It's not hard to imagine why that might be performing better than usual. Largely, there's just a whole lot more online activity, and that's resulted in more opportunity, more inventory for advertising. So that's working very well. We're also seeing, again, not surprising, the volume of people clicking online on ads in general is going up. And as a result, and that, again, it's not surprising because so many people are online right now, and I'm sure you all have your own anecdotal insights into all the things that we're doing to pass time right now, and or simply being forced into our devices because we're stuck at home and we have to communicate that way. So as a result of that, the cost per click and the cost per acquisition, or when we say acquisition, we mean a new lead. It still has to be converted to a patient. Thank you so much to those of you who are just joining us. We've just gotten started, so you haven't missed anything. We are just kind of going through some of the trends that we're noticing in the digital advertising landscape over the last few weeks, and kind of what we're going to recommend going forward here. So thank you for joining and stay with us here. If you have any questions, it seems that we have a chat capability here. This looks a little bit different than what I'm normally used to. Let me see here. I am going to say hello, everyone. And I think we're just going to have to put our questions there in the chat.
Also, if someone wants to, it looks like, in addition to the chat, it looks like there's the ability for someone to turn on their video or audio if they want. Again, as we all know, this is kind of breaking the ice on how to do this sort of a circumstance in a virtual, like an aesthetic meeting in a virtual world like this. But it looks like with what they've set us up with, you guys can maybe turn on your camera or your audio and ask us a question directly or in the chat. We're going to be talking quite a bit here. So for now, I think just drop it in the chat and we'll see if we can take them up as they come.
Yeah, we'd like to make this really interactive. We don't want to be dry and boring. We'll go through the things that we wanted to show all of you. However, really open to letting this take its own direction. And honestly, just turn your mic on, turn your camera on if you want to. And we understand everyone's got their kids running around at home and they're wearing suit jackets and pajama pants. Because that's the new world apparently that we live in. No, but please, we want to make this very interactive. So please feel free to jump in and ask questions. If you're familiar with some of the key metrics with Google advertising, impression share and ad position are important things And I can go into those more in detail, or if anyone has questions, they can put them in here or email us afterward. My email is max@influxmarketing.com, and Adam is adam@influxmarketing.com. And we're, honestly really willing to take questions at any time. Anything we can do to help. We understand practices are really under a lot of strain right now, and we want to help how we can with communication strategy. So if we can offer any advice, we're here to do so. So we're seeing an improvement in for those ads that are still running. They're getting more impression share for the same budget, which is really great. Of course, there is an increase in the amount of people who are just popping in and looking at websites and leaving. That's going to be normal when there's all this increase in traffic, but it hasn't, there are still a lot of people who are actually converting, and we can show you some examples of this. There is softer search demand, because particularly for what we've seen is for non-surgicals, although I have seen inquiries coming in for that. But people are still interested in doing virtual consults for surgery. They're still asking and sort of planning ahead and using this time to research the things that they might have been considering for a long time. We all know that the life cycle of a patient making a decision, especially their first surgery, it's not a short process. So they're looking, and they first are looking to decide if they want to do it and what procedure is right for them, and then they begin to look at the surgeon. And so a lot of that is still happening right now, which is really good. So even though there's a little less search demand or less search volume, it's offset by the fact that many practices have decreased their spend. And so that's actually allowing those that are still doing it to capture a decent share or a decent volume. And those searchers who are still searching are showing higher intent, because if they're searching right now, then it means something to them. So I think that's the important takeaway there. Just going to switch the slide here. There we go. Here's a couple examples of real Google advertising accounts where you can see the trend starting in February, and then it begins to increase here in March. The red line is the average cost per click. And all of this has to do with, it's a bidding system, right? So all this has to do with how many other people are bidding on that same keyword. And things are increasing here in March in the actual amount of clicks, which obviously is going to go up as the cost goes down if you're spending the same budget. Also goes up in March. And then there's a really steady trend here through April where those two lines diverge very clearly, showing again an increase in total clicks and a drop in the cost per click, which is just for those practices that are continuing to advertise, shows that they've been able to stretch those budgets further and have some reward. Now, it doesn't make sense for every practice to advertise. We're not, as marketers, we don't want to be self-serving and say, well, you got to advertise. That might not be true for you. And we're not going to tell people that they ought to when they have to make that as a personal decision. Marketing is a lot like investing. Your strategy, your style, how aggressive you want to be, how contrarian you want to be is up to you. However, it also has a ton to do with your resources. If you have a team, if you haven't had to completely, depending on how you've been, if you've had to furlough your team or what you've had to do there, it might not make sense to try to do this. Now, if you do have someone who can kind of keep in all the administration on this and track all the virtual consult requests and make sure they get scheduled and then reschedule them again for after this and all that, then it can be worth it. You just don't want to do it and then not have the resources to really tightly follow up on all of it and keep it all organized, because then it will be wasted effort and wasted resources, wasted money, really. Some people have asked us if, or I've heard some concern about doing a virtual consult and then having to do it again. And it is it is double work. And we're being asked, well, not us, but you are definitely being asked to work a bit extra. I know some fields where virtual consults have worked very well and they're actually able to deliver the full. Hi there. Did someone have a question? All right, well, welcome to anyone who's newly joined us. We want to encourage anyone to ask questions. Turn on your mic, interrupt us. We want to keep it pretty casual. And we want to answer those questions that, you really want to ask so that we can provide as much value as possible. So jump in here and let me know. Myself, my name is Max Bayback, and this is Adam Daniels. We are from Influx Marketing. We'd love to answer your questions. And if your kids want to pop in and say hi too, that's all right. So, where was I? So anyhow, it's important to make sure that you have the resources to follow up on these things. And yeah, okay. So some people, here's what I was saying. Some people are concerned about the double, work of a telehealth consult. It's double work. However, there is a lot of interest for those right now. And if you can get someone through a telehealth consult and then after the shutdown into your practice, that is a person who's showing a lot of high intent. So it is kind of a marketing effort at this moment in time, the initial telehealth touch point. And it's a way to get through things for right now. So for those practices that are structured to be able to do that, there is some reward. Here's another example, similar lines where we see the similar trends of the cost per click over April going down and the clicks going up. And so these are, again, if it makes sense for you, there is reward here in terms of being able to stretch your budget further. And we're seeing similar things. As I mentioned at the outset here, display advertising is really outperforming its normal metrics because of how many people are online, and that would include Facebook and Instagram. Now, we typically think of Facebook and Instagram as a better home for advertising things that are non-surgical. However, there are strategies for acquiring surgical patients through it. We would look at Google much more for that, both organically and paid. So what we mean by organically is you don't always have to pay for every lead that you're getting. And there are, through search engine optimization, you can make sure you're getting Google leads that are not paid. So, but we're seeing performance increase on both Google and on Facebook. I don't want to bore you guys too much with these graphs, but we did want to show some real hard data. This is a sampling here of practices showing the average cost per click and the cost per conversion. And again, we have these both downtrending. The fact that the cost per click goes so low here in April and the cost per conversion doesn't completely follow along makes sense because we have a lot more clickers, a lot more casual kind of lookers, shoppers during this period of time when everyone's at stay at home. That makes a lot of sense. That not all of them are going to be converting. However, there's still people with high interest converting. So again, these are people who kept their ads on, and we've excluded people who've made a lot of changes in their accounts here. These are people who actually who kept it pretty steady versus kind of shifting budgets up and down. And they've gotten some reward for it. Again, budgets going further. The key thing on this graph here is just, again, I mentioned earlier, and I'm kind of doing this whole talk with the assumption that there's some familiarity with Google advertising and also Facebook and Instagram, but particularly Google. Search impression share is a big part of Google. How much of the market share are you getting for particular keywords that you and your competitors are vying for? How many times are you being shown? That's what the impression means. And this is what's really interesting here is, again, while the cost per conversion is going down, the search impression share is going up. Because you have to realize with Google advertising, you're not paying for every impression. You're only paying for the click. And so the more times you get shown, the better opportunity you're going to have to capture great traffic. And so with the same budget, you're getting shown more times. Normally, Google has to divide that up between all the people bidding for that keyword. And in this case, with more people cutting back their budgets, this is increasing the search impression share for those who are staying at it. The lesson here is not only that there can be some reward and some stretching of budgets over the last few weeks for those practices that have been able to put together a virtual consult strategy that makes sense for them, but it's also something to look at as we ramp back, that some practices may still be reticent to do so. And what we're seeing is that as long as every state and even city are going to be dealing with different parameters for this. But as long as you're set up to kind of get back in business, we would recommend getting back to your advertising. And again, you need to do it with what's comfortable for you based on your means. We're not going to make blanket recommendations. That's not something we would do. We really understand that this kind of stuff is personal. But I think what we can learn from this is that there's opportunity here where maybe not everybody is going to jump all the way back in. In fact, I can almost guarantee that, and you can win and steal more of that demand, because we still are seeing demand. A lot of people with our clients writing and asking for virtual consults. So that's the lesson here, is that we want people to realize, we want practices to realize that if they so choose to dive back in, it will not be wasted. In fact, there's advantage, and there's a little more that they can get out of their normal budgets right now. So we have a question here from Catherine Stewart Chafu, who is a lovely client of ours. And she says, "Hi, Max, our practices conversion rates higher who are still doing PPC now than pre-COVID?" Yeah, so that's actually basically what we're seeing. This cost per conversion going down is on the same ad budgets as prior. So what that means, and that's what we particularly, we made sure to show on this graph those practices that kept things basically steady. They made that choice to do so. And so with conversion cost per conversion going down on the same budget, that would mean higher conversion rate. That would mean more conversions. In some cases, the conversion rate is holding about the same, but they're getting a lot more clicks for the same budget, if that makes sense. So you're spending, let's just say $100. Let's just say it's $5 per click. So you're getting 20 visits, and maybe normally you convert half of those. That's 50%. Right now you might get $2.50 click, so you're getting 40 visits, and you might still only convert 50%, but now you're getting 20. So if that math, I'm just running through it really quick, but what that means is that even if the conversion rate is holding about the same, you're getting more traffic for the same amount of money, and in fact, it's leading to more conversions. Just want to say hi to anyone who's just joining us. Thank you so much for coming into our chat here. This is all unique, and I just want to say I'm also really impressed and proud of ASAPs for making this pivot. I know it's a hard time. I know we all want to get back to work, but in the meantime, being able to kind of rally together as an industry group, it's really inspiring to see. And I hope everyone's adapting to this new style of meeting. I hope I answered that question there, Catherine. Let me know if you have any other questions. And if anyone has questions, there is a group chat here where you can pop in and ask a question. And we are encouraging anyone to go ahead and turn on their microphone or camera, even if you want, and just ask away. Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and Adam's going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in virtual consults. Are they worth it? Are they working? How are practices making it work? Adam, take it away.
Hi, everyone. So good. I'm glad for everyone here to join us. And I want to just, my part in this is I want to really quickly talk about virtual consultation. So I would imagine the vast majority of you guys here, maybe not, but I would imagine the vast majority have heard about the push towards virtual consultations since all of this has happened. We have a unique perspective in that we have clients all across the country in all different circumstances where there's varying degrees of lockdown and varying degrees of stay-at-home orders. But the one thing that I can say is I've talked to pretty much all of our clients about virtual consultations. I've gotten, sort of like you could consider it a broad survey of how that's going for them. One of the first things that we did within the first week or two is we put a virtual consultation. You can see, for example, in this slide, in the upper right-hand corner, it says virtual appointment, book an appointment, virtual appointment. So new virtual appointments. We added that kind of messaging and communication across all of the websites of all of our clients. We also, it's not shown here, but we added pop-ups, which clearly communicated. Kind of goes without saying, it's really important that you're clearly messaging to your potential clients or potential patients that either you're open or you're limitedly open or you're completely closed. If you're completely closed, you're only closed physically, but virtually you can still talk with them. It's also worth mentioning, I would imagine most people here already know this, but I'll cover it again, that about 4 or 5 weeks ago, there was direction made at that time from the government that there was a relaxation of restrictions on telehealth and virtual, like certain elements of HIPAA compliance in relation to that, at least for the time being, in order to facilitate making virtual consultations very easy to get done. This website here, this example that's being shown is Marina Plastic Surgery in Marina Del Rey, Dr. Grant Stevens. You can see that we set him up with a text messaging system where it says in the bottom right-hand corner, "Hello, would you like to schedule a free virtual consultation?" And then again, there's a feature just above the top, which is now offering virtual appointments, video appointments. It's really important. We again, to what Max was saying, it's really important if you are going to do virtual consultations to have a really strong follow-up system, because we found where we're messaging it, and some practices, they're kind of like doing them a little, but maybe their office isn't like the person who's answering incoming phone calls or answering incoming web forms. They're not super grouped in to schedule an appointment like that, or how to all of the technologies and so forth associated with it. It's really worth taking a day or two and really getting that completely nailed down and making sure your system is in place. Because for those practices that we have seen that have done it, we have a couple, like for example, in New York and some other areas where they have been doing a lot of virtual consultations, and come mid-May or even June, whenever things start going, they're going to have a very busy schedule. And they're kind of tentative to start scheduling some of those VCs or virtual consultations that they've already done. Here's an example of a form that we implemented on one site, and we're starting to roll out to all of our different clients, where in addition to just, hey, do you want a virtual consultation? It's a very robust web form. It asks for information. For example, name, last name. They gave a little initial for their digital signature, which says that they've agreed to a informed consent and a privacy policy. They give their first name, their last name, email, weight, height. They give information, including uploading their driver's license, photos. So one of the things that's worth mentioning is we've seen a pretty healthy demand for actually going and doing a virtual consultation for aesthetic procedures. We've seen them generated through ads, and we've seen them generated organically, where kind of the consumers understand this in this time where they're at home. Part of that high interest is people are thinking, hey, I'm at home. This would be a good time to do a surgery and recover. Granted, it's not like an elective surgery can be done, but that is what's driving their process of how, if they call you now, they can maybe start the process. And they've always been thinking about that abdominoplasty or that rhinoplasty or whatever the circumstance is. And they really are interested in your consultation on it and looking at their nose or their whatever the procedure is they're interested in. Also interesting in that is that we found a high level of comfort from a lot of individuals to submit very detailed virtual consultation forms like this, by making sure that we put a lot of trust and a lot of communication that their information is secure if they submit it through the website. And there is a high willingness to do it. In some cases, some of our clients are seeing 4 or 5 of these virtual consultation forms a day being filled out. So it can work. And the more data that is provided, obviously, the easier it is to then walk into doing the video consultation with that potential patient, because you have a lot more before you even talk to them.
They really like it. One thing that I've noticed is that once I take it out, I leave it for a week. They come back. They have no plan.
I can figure out. Okay, I think I found. Did it? I found it.
That's a question. Okay, sorry about that.
If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to just chime in. And by the way, as you can see at the bottom here, if you want to download this presentation, you can do so at influxmarketing.com/ASAPs. We're also going to send you a couple recent white papers that we've put out, both on how to market during this period of time and some other things that we previously published that we think are really applicable to now. So check that out at influxmarketing.com/ASAPs. All right, Adam, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah. So another thing that's important to keep in mind is I think everyone that's listening to this should consider that virtual consultations, opposed to being kind of like some practices did them before a little, and they were kind of a thing. I would be willing to accept the fact that this is going to be moving towards the new norm. A lot of people are going to be really used to and expecting to do virtual consultations. In some cases, it's way more convenient for them, not just if they live across the country or in another state, but even if they live in the same city or within 10 miles from you, someone might be interested in a virtual consultation. It also, there was one practice I was talking to where they found it really interesting because they encountered a situation where they would sometimes have new patients coming in to see the doctor, and the doctor would end up running over in surgery for an hour or 30 minutes, and they would end up having a line in their waiting room, where if they scheduled their whole day full of a chunk of virtual consultations, they're easier to move around because the person's just at home or they're on the fly, and it makes it actually a little bit more scheduling friendly if you are able to do that. And so as long as the technologies and the system of how to do this is drilled and improved and made better and better, it can actually help from now and in the foreseeable future, make your lives even a little bit easier, even if it might seem like double work that you're talking to them virtually and then they're coming in and doing. When they come in to see you, at that point, it's not just an initial consult. It's like, we're coming in to do any sort of final review and go over it with the doctor and then pay for the surgery. So that's what we're seeing on virtual consultations. And we're recommending to everyone that they really go hard on that, on their websites, on their messaging. I'm imagine a number of you guys here, because there's a number of doctors that I can see on here, or offices that aren't our clients. So I'm sure that there's plenty of good marketing companies out there, but we recommend, just on a help level, that you stress on your website and any of your advertising to push for this, especially right now, and to keep an eye on it into the future. Next slide.
Yes, sir. Sorry, coming up. I'm sorry. We have another thing here. They've given us the ability to chat with people through the aesthetics meeting interface here, and Dr. Stevens and also another lovely client of ours, Dr. Eliopoulos, were just giving us some shout outs there, so I needed to respond. I apologize. Here we go. Next slide for you. So, Adam, go ahead. Sorry.
So when to ramp up ads? So like Max was saying earlier, really, when it comes to investment of putting money into advertising, it really is like an investment. Are you a contrarian? You know, when the market's down, when everyone's at home, are you willing and do you have the budgets to put into advertising at a time like this, or to put into marketing during a time like this? And I will say, you know, it is a level of risk tolerance that it takes, where you know, there's plenty of huge businesses that made during a time where they took an opportunity to get more market share during a time like this, and they made a bet and it paid off. So one of the things that Max was showing in some of those earlier statistics is that starting in April, you could tell that generally there was you know, across the full spectrum of everyone in all the different areas, there was some practices that started to pull back their ad spend. There were some practices that started to pour on the ad spend in that time period. Those are practices that I think are enjoying taking some of that interest, even if it's going to become a patient for them in a month or two from now, or 3 months. They're using that opportunity to start building their pipeline of new patients in the future. So like it says, pipelines take time to fill. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the fact that you might see a patient, you're not going to do surgery on that patient the next day. It takes weeks, in some cases months, in order to get all that planned out. So going at it, one of the things we are seeing is that now is a good time. It's better than it was a month ago. As things are starting to ramp back on, like here in Utah, elective surgeries became able to be delivered just 2 days ago or 3 days ago. So there's worth looking at your local area, looking at your level of risk, and starting to put some investment into that if that's where you're at with your budgets and your risk tolerance.
One thing I want to mention too, Adam, you mentioned those practices that have stayed at it were rewarded. I think how rewarded they are is going to be based on their follow-up, because when you do have a delay in between when someone's done, this is the reason why we didn't, just because we were seeing increased conversion rates or more or even just cheaper conversions, we didn't necessarily say to every practice, you must do this. It's still personal, because when you do interject time in between the initial contact and the actual surgery, there's going to be more fall off. So that, I think that's just something we all, I think, inherently know. So how tight that follow-up is going to matter greatly as to how much of that is actually converted into real patients. But I think what we're seeing as the opportunity now is that as soon as we're starting, which we are starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel in various cities, I think we would recommend those practices that want to come back online quick to start pretty much, we would say now, simply because of that. It takes time to fill the pipeline. So previously it was more of a personal decision. Now we do think that you will potentially encounter lost time, which will equal a little bit of lost ground if you're not diving back in pretty quick here because of that time to fill the pipeline. So I think that's the opportunity we see, more so than really saying, oh, you should have been doing it. That's really not what we're saying. We're saying it's actually what we're observing are trends that you can capitalize on still now.
Exactly. All right, we can jump to the next.
Okay, great. And again, we want to encourage, thank you to anyone newly who has jumped in here newly. We want to encourage this to be as interactive as possible. Someone turn on their mic there. If you want to just turn on your mic, pop in, ask a question, or there is a Zoom group chat, which you can see. I believe it is right here, chat. I don't know if the screen that you all are seeing looks like mine, but there's the ability to hit chat here. And then you can ask us a question. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, we have a question. Please go ahead.
No, I'm just coming in. I'm from Peru. Nice to meet you.
Oh, welcome. Welcome from Peru. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you do have a question, please just go ahead and chime in. If it's okay with you, I'm going to mute your microphone just to make sure.
Thank you.
But you're welcome to unmute it and ask a question if you like. And thank you so much for joining us. All right, Adam, I will then turn it back to you with the next slide here.
Sounds good. Okay, good. So another thing that it's important to talk about is, this might seem fairly obvious, but there's actually some nuances to this that's worth talking about. So when we say some of our clients kept their ads on, any sort of promotional effort, obviously, the more in context it is to a circumstance, the more response you get. So if your ads were working great in February, they may not have been working great in March or April if they didn't include something that was relevant to virtual consultation. Yes, we're open. We're taking, here's the steps that we're taking to be careful for our clients. So these examples that we're putting up here, the food industry knows this better than anyone, but it applies to all industries. So you can see these two Facebook ads that on the right. One of them relates to a beer ad, an alcohol ad for the big game. There's several elements that relate to the time that an ad is shown and the communication message. So I would never show stock up for the big game sort of beer ad at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or even 9 a.m. in the morning. However, if you play it at 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., you're probably going to get more interaction with it because people are going to be, it's just more relevant to that circumstance. I don't know if you want to jump in on any of this stuff, Max, but I know we talked about this yesterday as well, related to.
It may seem funny to draw parallels to, we're certainly not trying to compare industries here, but it's just, these are some examples where context is really important to driving engagement. When you tell a person that you're, as the advertiser, you're living in the same world as them, it catches their attention and it helps to distinguish from all the kind of wallpapery advertising that's out there. That's just kind of my term for generic advertising. And so these are just examples where context and timeliness matters. And the other examples we want to show you that do relate to our industry may not seem quite as specific as these, where it's down to the hour, but the lesson here is that the time, the surrounding time period, whether that be the hour, the day, the weekend, the week, the month, or just what's going on in the world, matters a lot. So here's some examples of that.
Yeah, so here's an example of a Facebook ad promoting a virtual consultation. In this case, we created this. It's obviously an image of, in this case, Dr. Grant Stevens. He's on a phone. It's an example. It's a mock of a virtual consultation happening. So we created this and started running it in an effort to be real with people that this is how you're going to be interfacing with the doctor. There's another example where one of the practices we work with in Illinois, it was their idea, and a very smart idea of theirs. They created an AskSinger, which is an aesthetic service knowledge center, where they have 5 aesthetic specialists standing by to answer the questions, obligation free. You don't have to even do a virtual consultation with them, but call them, send them a message, and they kept several members of their team on in this circumstance just to answer questions and to provide a knowledge resource to their community. Because, and we ran a whole series. This is one of the ads that we ran, but there was a series of other ones where it's like, bored at home, been thinking about XYZ, like, things that would make sense to a person who's seeing this on their feed or while they're surfing the internet, because internet traffic in general is very high right now, and people are just browsing social media, browsing the internet. So we were able to generate for them a bunch of interest from this as well.
Yes, thank you to those who are just joining us. Dr. Grant Stevens, I see you popped in here. Hello, hello.
Hi there. How are you? Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Are you and how are you enjoying the ASAP's meeting from lovely Manhattan Beach?
I've been enjoying it. I was on the buttocks section, and Dan Del Vecchio hosted that along with the other great presenters. It was terrific.
Absolutely. I couldn't think of a better person to present that one than Dr. Del Vecchio.
Neither could I. And the topics were fantastic. It was a great session.
Awesome. We're really proud to be able to be a part of this meeting. I know it's not easy for everyone to have to do this from home and to have to be home, but I think it's a transitional event. I hope we don't have to do it this way for long, but the way that ASAP's pivoted here and the ability to bring this kind of value to people streaming it right into their homes to ASAP's members is really, really incredible. And we're inspired and proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, we want to thank you. The Aesthetic Society appreciates all of our exhibitors and all of our exhibitors' support. It's the lifeblood of our society, and we're partners with you. And we want to thank you and Influx and Adam for this presentation.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So we're encouraging, Dr. Stevens, anyone to pipe in if they have questions. So if you have any questions, let us know, or if anyone wants to jump in. And we want to keep this really conversational. We have sort of a presentation here, but we're gonna keep it casual if anyone wants to pipe up.
How do we do that?
So there is, I don't know if you can see on my screen here, there is the ability there's a chat here. I don't know if it looks the same for everyone back home, but there's a chat here, and you can ask questions in a little box like this. But also, anyone is welcome to unmute their microphone right here and just interrupt and ask us a question.
Okay, super.
All right, Adam, I'm going to keep it going with you. Oh, what's that, Dr. Stevens?
Am I on video right now?
You're not. We just hear your voice. Your camera is off. Yeah.
Okay.
We can't see your pajama pants.
No, I've already taken my hike. I'm good. Let's see. I'm curious. Am I on video now?
Now you are. Now
there,
you are.
We can see you now.
Hey,
Hi.
Hey, Adam.
Hey.
I don't mean to interrupt your wonderful presentation, so get back with it, and I'll take myself out of here.
Okay, great.
Okay, great seeing you.
I'll stay on and listen. You guys are the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. You're the best.
Thanks,
really
Doc.
appreciate you popping by.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on.
Okay,
Teach
awesome.
me, Adam.
Okay, good. Here we go. So this next example is a search ad where it says plastic surgeon Los Angeles is the search, and you can see top LA plastic surgeon offering virtual consults. Book now, testimonials. So this is an example of changing the context of an ad so that it's relevant to the time it would prompt a person to click on it. We did see a number of circumstances where some ads that we saw that were left on were not contextual. These not our ads, but we saw other circumstances of this happening where they hadn't been updated. And we're just recommending, if you do have a circumstance like that you get with whoever you were working with, or talk to us and get those updated. Okay, here's another example. And I think this one's really interesting. This one says, Mommy Makeover Houston, we are open and seeing patients. So it's really clear messaging. We are open. It goes without saying, a lot of people are confused. Are you open? Are you not open? Are you semi-open? So any messaging that just right from the very first communication point indicates that. And then right after that says, health and safety are #1 concern. So it makes clear, book appointment now, health and safety. They have an entire section now that they've put up, which explains how they're taking measures to make sure that when you do come into the practice, once it opens again, it lays out what the practice is doing to make sure that they're ahead of the game or following and adhering to all necessary measures to make sure that you're safe coming in. It's really important to make sure that any interested person is feeling very safe coming into your practice. So I think this is a very good ad.
I think another thing about it too is, and this is a general statement that I would say is true, is there's a lot of confusion right now. And although many of our practices and every business under the sun has sent out an email and has a pop-up on their website, and it may seem a little redundant, it is important to not assume anything and simply be very clear in your messaging. And that was important in the beginning when there was a lot of confusion. I think everyone kind of came to understand this life as it has been for the last few weeks, and that confusion has normalized a little. But I think there'll be confusion again as each state comes online and each county and so forth in different patterns. Here we have an example. Obviously, this is Texas, where I think Texas along with Georgia are the two kind of most aggressive in terms of reopening things. So there will be many practices that turn their ads back on, and it doesn't really clearly state, are they open? Are they seeing patients? Are they taking extra precaution? So don't assume, and simply eliminate confusion by just hitting them over the head with the clearest messaging possible. And that's what this ad illustrates here. And then again, there's contextual ad language that will resonate with the way people are feeling at this moment. Don't put off your needs any longer. We are now open and seeing patients in Houston. Learn what we are doing to ensure the health and safety of our patients. So, and we have a couple other examples of a contextual ad here. Adam, if you want to.
Yeah, so don't turn your old ad campaigns back on. Tell consumers you live in the same world as they do. This is, again, just making the same point. In this case, visually, this is probably how a lot of people feel after living at home for 5 weeks. So the image is kind of grabbing in that it's also talking post-quarantine beauty specials. It's very real, like you've just been in your home for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Now it's time to come in and get yourself looking great as soon as you can. We get it. After weeks of being stuck at home, you need some pampering and self-care. Let our beauty experts help you look and feel your best so you can face life confidently. And then it has a sign up. One thing that's relevant to this, and we're going to talk about it in a second, is when it says sign up, it's really important that some of these ads that are being run are actually capturing identities. They're capturing people who are interested in a circumstance like this. They're capturing an email. They're allowing you to continue to market in what we call building your list, which is actually, we'll talk about it in a second. It's what e-commerce has been doing for years. And there's a page from that playbook that, as services companies like a plastic surgeon is moving more and more into this kind of new digital world, we have some other learnings from other industries that we have other teams that work in, where we really kind of want to bring some of those learnings over to aesthetics and aesthetic practices, because this is how you're going to be able to stay ahead of the game in an event of anything like this happening again, a second wave, things like that. It's going to be able to keep you expanding your practice despite some of these adversities where you may not be able to get in front of a person whenever you want. So then I'll let Max talk about that.
Yeah, so thank you, Adam, and building on what Adam was just referring to there at the end, I'll explain a little more on that, just to give you even more context. Right now, I don't know if any of you have followed, or maybe you've even have your own anecdotal insights into your own online shopping, but e-commerce, direct-to-consumer websites that sell products has been, in large part, doing very well during this period of time. There are certain verticals within e-commerce that have suffered and some that have soared. Overall, Shopify, which is a publicly traded company that provides software tools for companies to build e-commerce websites, has reported Black Level Friday. I think the quote that they gave, one of their leader executives gave, was Black Friday traffic on a daily basis during the quarantine. And Black Friday traffic is monstrous. So that's an interesting statistic to pay attention to. It seems maybe moot. Well, how can we emulate that in aesthetics, in any medical setting, private practice in general? But there actually is there are some very definite ways that we can emulate and steal a page from their playbook. It sounds overly simplistic, but the number one strategy in e-commerce, we pay a lot of attention to e-commerce. We have extensive experience in e-commerce. And the number one rule in e-commerce, and it really should be and is the number one rule in all marketing, is building a list. That's typically an email list. There are some other types of lists that people are building today. It also would apply to your social media following. You're building a list, so to speak. That said, your list that you build when you're building a social media following is not really owned by you. I sort of use the analogy of building a house with your own money on somebody else's land. It has risks to it. You should do it today with social media, but you don't have control of that audience. You cannot reach that audience entirely at any given time without paying for it. As most of you probably know, you might have 10,000 followers. Most of your posts are not reaching all of them. Facebook and Instagram want you to pay for the majority of them to see those posts. That's less true with an email list. Not every email gets opened, but that's your audience and you can do what you please with it. And in e-commerce, everything in e-commerce marketing is structured around building and building and building and building that list and building that loyal following. And we're very familiar with scenarios where many e-commerce companies send out an email and it just prints money for them. Now they have the ability for a person to click and buy something, and that makes a big difference. But the loyalty in those lists is incredible. I'm not going to go too deep into this now, but there are other strategies of building Facebook Messenger lists and also building up lists of SMS, because this is where e-commerce is trending. text or SMS is really the preferred way of communication these days for most consumers, the majority, I would say, at least kind of the generation that's coming in to become our primary consumer. And so there are ways to build SMS lists too. There are a lot of regulations around it, but there are ways to do that. At the end of the day, what really matters the most is that you're building a list. And then there are automations. And what we mean by automations is, you've been on a shopping cart in an e-commerce website, put something in your cart and then left, and then you get an email that says, hey, you left this in your cart. That's an example of an marketing automation or email automation. Or maybe you might not even be aware of this, but you can be on a site, if you spend a certain amount of time on a site and you bought something from them a year ago, so they have your email, but you didn't enter your email on this time around, and then you leave, and then a day later it says, hey, we noticed, did you see something you liked? That can be done, and a lot of brands are doing that. It's automation. Hey, you haven't purchased anything in a while. You haven't been, buy your regular product. Here's an email with a coupon code. Oh, you're a high value customer. You spent more than 90% of our other customers in the last year. We'd like to reward you. And this isn't manually calculated and sent. There are systems that just do this stuff like clockwork. It just keeps people coming through. And what that is welcome to anyone who's just joining us. Thank you so much. We're welcoming any questions. There's a chat room here you can find in your controls where you can pop in and ask a question. Also, go ahead and just feel free to just turn on your mic and interrupt us. We want to keep this really casual and not bore you to death with our PowerPoint here. But we're going to keep going here. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can download this presentation, by the way, at influxmarketing.com/ASAPs. We're also going to send you with that a number of white papers that we've recently put together to help practices during this time. So go ahead and head over there and grab that if you're interested. The kind of term that's used throughout e-commerce is lifecycle management, or LTV, which stands for lifetime value. So viewing the patient from the lifetime perspective. And actually, Dr. Stevens, who's here in this chat, I've spent a lot of time talking with you about the lifetime value of a surgical patient. I think that's been kind of a hallmark of your success in terms of the patients for life approach that you take. Do you agree?
I would totally agree. And we all know that new patient acquisition is 7 to 10 times more expensive than maintaining patients within your practice. Doesn't matter if you're a dry cleaner or a plastic surgeon. The business school studies show this consistently, time and again. So keeping patients in our practice and patients for life is really the most efficient and economical way to go. The other thing is, if you calculate the lifetime value of a patient, which I've done on a number of studies, and you provide a full array of aesthetic services, aesthetic medicine, and also aesthetic surgery, what we found in a couple of our studies is the average patient will have 3 operations over a 20 to 25 year period. And we quantified how many times they'll come in for skincare, lasers, and injectables, and so forth. And their lifetime value is between $80,000 and $120,000 in a 20-year span.
Yeah, and I love something you told me once, Dr. Stevens, and I think this correlates so much to the term lifetime value, where we kind of talked about the procedures that they tend to do at the different points in their, and you've been doing this, and you've had patients that have come back to you at all these different points in their lives, and then even coming back with their children.
Yes.
I think that's such an interesting aspect.
It's fun to follow that and to actually lay it out as a tree and see. That's the sort of the cross-pollination when they start bringing their friends and family. But if you pick up a person in their 20s to 30s, it looks totally different than if you pick them up in their 40s to 50s. But I've traced it out and kind of followed these people that have had the good fortune of covering for up to 30 years. And it's really fascinating to me. You might pick up someone with a breast dog in their 20s, say, and then typically it's a abdominoplasty or mommy makeover or a body contouring procedure in their 40s or 50s. And then following that, it's generally a facial rejuvenation, like a facelift and face and eyes. But that's not to say someone can't hook in their 40s and have a bleph to start and maybe a breast lift or a mommy makeover. But if you continually provide the services and you're their beauty provider and you're their trusted physician, almost like a primary care physician, they keep coming back to you for their monthly hydrofacials or their every 6-month injections or their laser hair removal, whatever it is. And then if you provide them content through things like Friend Media or whatever you're using on your digital platforms in the reception areas and the treatment rooms, it just brings up more conversational opportunities with the staff and with you, and invariably it leads to more surgery. It's actually pretty darn simple.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's so logical when you talk about if you do pick them up in their 20s, perhaps it's a breast procedure and then abdominoplasty, maybe sort of mommy makeover, and then face procedures. But now with so many non-surgical procedures available, which I know, Dr. Stevens, your med spa has just about everything that can be offered. Those intervals are much closer together now when people would come back for repeat service, and it becomes much harder to manage. How do you remind a person that it's time to come back in, or reward those patients who are most loyal? And that's where adopting technology, and that's another thing that you've been a huge technology adopter, putting in place software systems and things that help you to automate and segment these things.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just another thing. Yeah. That we've enjoyed being a part of, because when a practice is aggressive in doing so, it makes a big difference, and it's hard to do. We know when these things take a lot of time to implement. We're here to help our clients do so, but it does require client involvement, and you're busy in the OR, you're busy seeing patients. It's challenging, but that goes a long way. And I think the differentiating opportunity that we see here is to adopt those technologies, to emulate some of these other strategies we're seeing in other industries that are more online. And I think in plastic surgery, in aesthetics, and in private practice in general, some of these strategies have not been fully adopted. A lot of that has had to do with privacy, with HIPAA concerns. So it's still a changing world right now. We're seeing the strong need for those HIPAA regulations to be reevaluated and currently relaxed regulation around it. But there are ways to make sure, there are a lot of platforms making sure that all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed with HIPAA compliance, and helping you to put this technology in place. It's here now. It really is possible to be that completely digital practice, which we kind of talk about right here. And I think that's really the differentiating opportunity. It's not necessarily super easy, but opportunity is not necessarily always about what's the easy. It's just there's a gap here, and it's those practices that I think really shift all the way into being a digital practice that are as online as possible in every touch point that they can be. Those are going to be the winners. So Adam, I don't know, I'll turn it over to you here. You could talk a little bit about all the touch points we see and opportunities where practices can emulate those industries that are more online based.
Yeah, so I'll say, like you said, the truly digital practice, without belaboring each one of these points, kind of what we're looking at, even all of our clients that we work with, not all of these points are even in, but it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of push in order to and time even, to get some of these systems implemented, get them drilled, get them actually working and firing on all cylinders. But what this slide here particularly explains is kind of our vision of what the future is of moving your practice into a digital space. There's no question that there's always going to be a physician's direct contact with the patient, the actual surgeries, the actual administering of the service. However, there are many other areas and touch points that the new digital era which helps make you not so impacted by a circumstance like this, or at least be better positioned to manage it when something like this does happen. So I'll run through these. So maximize reach and SEO with SEO, ads, social, and content. Goes without saying, if you rank really well on Google, SEO, or search engines, you're going to be found more. You're going to get more traffic. Having really well implemented ads that are in good context and that are managed correctly so that your cost per acquisition is making sense in thinking with the lifetime value of the client as well as the immediate of the patient, as well as the immediate service that they might do. Social, like Max was saying, building up a following, creating good content, building up a list essentially of just your ability to reach people and provide them with interesting content. It's not lost on us that all of those things, particularly the social and the content side of things, can take time, but putting an effort into it is important, especially moving forward. If you're looking now and 10 years into the future, it's going to be even more important, whether it's through Instagram or some other future social platform. It's important. SMS-based chat and lead capture. We recommend it for all of our clients that they have SMS-based chat specifically, meaning there's been chat platforms through a website for a decade easily at this point, probably even more than that. If you talked to me 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have said, I don't know that I would emphatically recommend having a website chat on your website because there was different systems. If someone jumped on your website at 1 a.m. and wanted to ask you a question and no one was there to answer, nothing happened. Then there's also managed chat platforms where someone else answers for you. Some of those are good. The reality is a lot of them need work to really be as good as that they should in order to really answer like your own practice would. SMS-based chat is a relatively newer implementation of this in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, where it's on your website and a person puts in their name, they put in their phone number, and it pushes it over to their mobile device immediately. So then you're texting with them essentially. And if it's at 1 a.m. the next morning when you come in, or your office manager or a patient care coordinator comes in, they can just jump right on and immediately start talking with that person. And we all know everyone carries a phone around with them these days, so you can immediately start talking with them again. That is the best implementation we've seen of it yet, where you can always end up being able to retouch that person and have a contact with them. VC forms, virtual consultation forms, which we just talked about a little bit ago.
I interrupt you really quick, Adam. I apologize. For anyone who has more questions about specifically that SMS chat-based feature and some of these other softwares, one of the things if you go to influxmarketing.com/ASAPs to download this guide, we'll also send you several papers that we've issued where we recommend the right systems that you should be using for these things. By downloading that there, you'll also we'll alert you when we put out more of this type of guidance and content. And you'll also find out when we have new episodes of our podcast, which is called Next Level Practices, which are we're putting out every few weeks or so, and you'll be alerted to those as well, which has a lot of information where we can go more in depth than we can maybe squeeze in right now to each of these types of platforms and how we recommend you implement them. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so I'll just jump through the rest of these because we have a few other things that I think it's worth us jumping through, and we got about 10 minutes left. So telehealth goes without saying. We recommend every doctor out there, no matter if it's in aesthetics or in other spaces, have a telehealth platform, have the ability to virtually consult with whoever you're talking with, a new potential patient, or even post-ops, things like that. Online scheduling, online purchases and payments, having the ability to purchase gift cards, for example, for non-surgical procedures or med spa procedures. Build an email database, which is build your list. In some cases, we've successfully run ads and certain initiatives where we've just collected interested emails, and we've been able to harvest a lot of interest and really nurture, which will be discussed in a second, automating that process where you have kind of a barely lukewarm lead, but they're kind of interested, but they've never really done any sort of non-surgical thing. And through a series of automated emails, you warm up that lead, and you're filling your funnel where you're able to generate a really huge, highly active and engaged clientele at a med spa or non-surgical. And then also that's applicable for surgical treatments where they can both be converted off of each other. Digital loyalty programs, like Max said, there's a whole lot to unpack there, but it's similar to a gift card, but different. But just creating loyalty systems like that where it encourages people to continue to engage with you, and having that not just be pen and paper, but through a digital means of how you keep track of all of that. And then online review management. Obviously, reviews are really important. I'm sure you've all probably seen a zillion talks on getting reviews for your practice, but that would be a part of the truly digital practice.
I think one of the key things too here, aside from email and email automation to follow up and nurture your list that you're building, online purchases would be the other most obvious way that you can emulate e-commerce. I think basically every marketing agency is recommending this. We're not unique in that. But what we've seen is that there's a huge appetite from consumers to shop this way for non-surgicals. We have no instances, and we wouldn't necessarily recommend that you sell surgery online. There might be, well, let me say this. We do have some practices who have the ability to take payment online. And that just does fit more into the consumer habits that people are used to these days. They like to be able to do that. So that is one thing you can look at. That's why we mentioned online payments. But in terms of actual purchases, kind of e-commerce shopping, of course, you can sell products from the companies that you might be a distributor for. There's a number of ways to do that. But gift cards and loyalty cards, we've actually helped for non-surgicals. We've helped non-surgical practices or medical spas take in tens of thousands of dollars this way. And I think the main thing to understand about this that I would want everyone to take away is that we're seeing that the consumer wants to work that way. That's the important thing to understand. It's not just a cash grab. Well, we're doing it online now, and you should, it really is that's their preferred methodology. And that's kind of similar to what we're seeing with the fact that they want to chat via text and SMS. We're seeing consumer habits change, and consumer habits change is where the opportunity is. That's what drives the opportunity. That's been the case with social media. Not everyone could see necessarily all these things. We didn't know we were all going to be dancing to, music videos on TikTok. But consumer habits change. In this case, there's some subtle things here, but we're in a position to observe them, and we'd like to share those with you so that you can sort of understand how you might start thinking of changing your workflows in your practice to be able to adapt to those consumer habits. And so coming back to one thing that we sort of talked about, I want to make sure I make clear. We mentioned this earlier campaign where the person can click here and just says sign up. And this is the goal with this campaign is just to build a list. So we can get relatively cheap signups to a mailing list through this, and then follow up with email marketing and nurture. Automation is, again, when I say nurture, it's sort of these automatically timed emails that will go out based on kind of insights that your software has into the consumer habits and the behaviors of that person, and sends them emails to prompt them to take next actions. So this is an example of emulating what's happening in the e-commerce world to build your own lists. Thank you to anyone who's just joining us, by the way. We are, Adam, I think you said we had about 10 minutes. I think this goes until 12. I'm sure you'll need some time to jump into your next talks, but we have about 20 more minutes that we'll be here. We're encouraging everyone to be, conversational, pipe up, and just go ahead and turn on your mic and interrupt us if you have a question. We'll try to wrap up in order to take a few questions, maybe make it give a little more space for you to jump in and ask questions. The opportunity that we see summarized, go ahead there. Okay, sorry, I thought we had a question. Apologies. So I mentioned our podcast. We actually just did an episode of the podcast, and actually Dr. Stevens, who I think is still here, joined us for an episode which we'll be releasing next week. And we talked a lot about the contrarian approach that can sometimes really lead to success when something is new. And there's a lot of examples in this podcast but that you'll hear. And again, if you sign up to download this presentation at influxmarketing.com/ASAPs, we'll also send you an update when that podcast episode comes up. But you'll hear Dr. Stevens talk a lot about opportunities that others maybe didn't see, where he was even going against the grain of what other people might have thought was going to make sense or work, and it actually paid off big. So there's some contrarian opportunities here. Dr. Stevens, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to echo that the podcast, I had a great time doing the podcast with you, but I also want to express to the listeners, I'm oftentimes asked if I have anything to do with Influx, and the answer is no. I have absolutely no financial remuneration. I just happen to love working with Max and Adam. They're two of the most creative guys I've ever had the wonderful opportunity to work with, and I have no interest in this company whatsoever, except they are my internet guys. They're my go-to guys for social media, internet, my websites, and so forth. So I employ them, but I don't get anything back in return for any of the stuff I'm doing with them. I want that to be perfectly clear.
I appreciate you saying that, and I don't fault people for thinking that you might have some interest, because you're so gracious and generously kind with your words about our work so often, more so than you need to be, and we really appreciate that.
Well, it's my pleasure. I really, really appreciate everything you do for me and my practice, and what you're doing for the Aesthetic Society. And I just think we should take care of one another. It's just that simple.
I completely agree. And actually, I'm going to jump ahead to show you some things that we're doing in that spirit of all of us taking care of one another. And we appreciate that, Dr. Stevens. We're proud to be here to support ASAPs. And I'll show you some of the things that we're doing to kind of rally in our industry and help practices get back on their feet. I don't want to belabor this particular slide. The point is that incorporating and embracing these technologies, taking the time to implement them and bring them into your workflow and train your staff, it's not going to be easy. Opportunity, I think what I said here is not necessarily about easy, but it's about early. A lot of these things are not new to the world, but they are new to healthcare. And again, that has a lot to do with constraints around privacy that I think technology has solved, or is fairly well solved for the most part. In the beginning with Google, with Instagram, the barriers to entry were not low. And that's what made it an opportunity. If it was low, for everyone to start producing all this content and taking time out of your day, it's exhausting to put up a website and to get it ranking #1 on Google. This is not low-hanging fruit. However, it's just an opportunity that's new. So those practices that sink their teeth in to some of these new technologies will be rewarded, we believe. Some of the guides that you can download on our website, if you go to that URL at the bottom of the screen there, talk about what we see as the new trends. And we actually really issued something that came out a while before the COVID-19, where we were just seeing a lot of our clients ask us, what's the next big social media platform? I don't want to miss the boat, kind of. I want to be on the next Instagram wave. And we've said that at least in the foreseeable future, we don't see that at the next big marketing sea change and difference maker. We don't see it being a social media platform. It's more so all of these technologies that have been being used in other industries coming over into the healthcare space, into private practice specifically. And they already are here, but they're just not implemented. They're not ubiquitous. They're not completely, I would say they're even reaching a level of ubiquity, but not completely saturated, not completely implemented everywhere. They're kind of partial implementations in a lot of practices. And that has to do with time constraints, and that has to do with technologies. But we partner with a lot of companies that do bring amazing technologies to the aesthetic space that are changing that. So I want to talk about that. I'm going to come back to these slides, and I'm going to tell you guys about something that we're doing here. This is a promotion that we put together called Stronger Together. You can find it on our website if you just go to influxmarketing.com/stronger, where we've teamed up with some great companies. We have no official partnerships with any of these companies. We just simply have good relationships with a lot of them. And we've asked each of them to put together some kind of an offering that can help you get your practice up and running faster, to help you implement new technologies that can help you to do more with less, more efficiently. Again, we know these things take a lot of time to implement. And so this is a time when I think I heard someone say, if you can't work in your practice, you can work on your practice. And I think that's really brilliant, because these things normally demand your time. And right now you might have just a little bit more of it to put these things in place. These are all these companies are great examples of the technologies that we recommend practices really start embracing. Many of you might already be using some of these companies, and there's a few more listed on the page on our website. So we've teamed up. Was there someone there that had a question? Okay, sorry, I'll continue. We've teamed up with these companies to try to, help each other out as companies, but also to help your practices. So I hope some of those things might be useful to your practices. Again, you can look at it at influxmarketing.com/stronger. And we just issued that yesterday on our website. I'll also let you know about, I think these things maybe sound a little more exciting than they are, but it's worth everyone knowing about these Facebook and Google ad grants. Welcome to anyone who's just joined us. I see we have a few new people. If you have any questions here, please go ahead and jump in. Just turn on your mic, or you can jump into the chat. Facebook has $100 million in grants that they're issuing. Half of the grants will be prioritized for minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. So I think that any practices that fit into those categories will have a much better chance of getting the grant. It's not a large grant. I actually wish it was all in ad credit, actually, but I guess you could just turn the cash into ad credits. It's $2,500 in cash to each business and $1,500 in optional ad credit. That could help. Let's say in a bounce back in the month of May, you could certainly produce a good amount of new patients with that money. So the only issue that I've seen is that, so there's some regulations here or some qualifications here, and then you go to this URL here. Again, if you want to download, go here. You can download this guide and you'll get all this information. But they're leaving the application open until May, and it looks like they're not even going to decide until May. So I don't know if that's really that helpful, since people need help right now, but I did want to provide that information. A lot of practices are asking, they've heard about this and they're asking us about it. Google also has a program where they're doing up to $340 million in ad credit. The way they've worded it is that it will be accounts that have been active over the past year, and there is no application process, unfortunately. So the funds will be deposited in accounts within the next few months. And that's not also super helpful, but it's something, again, that we want to, people are asking, they want to understand. Apparently the credits will expire at the end of 2020. So if you've had an active account over the past year, it's possible that you'll receive some credit. Again, I mentioned these 2 white papers that we've recently put out. One, we talk about upcoming trends and how to spot them and be future-proofed, and the other is things that you can be doing right now. We wrote a lot of this in the middle of the shutdown, the COVID-19 disruption booklet here, but a lot of it is still applicable, and we'd recommend you check it out. Again, you can get that at influxmarketing.com/asaps. Here, I could talk a little bit about who we are, but we only have a few more minutes, and I would love to encourage any questions. If you guys want to turn on your microphones, I want to let you get back to your sessions. I hope you've all got a chance to get something to eat. I think some of you here on the West Coast were up early in the morning, but we want to let you get back to it. Dr. Stevens, do you have a question?
No, I'm enjoying the time. I don't have a question. Thanks.
Okay, good. No, your camera popped up, and I thought maybe you were going to ask a question. If anyone wants to ask a question, we've got about 10 minutes, 11 minutes here. You can just turn on your microphone. I don't know if you can see right there. You'll probably have a mute option. You can also jump in the chat here, which if your interface is looking the same as mine, I'm not sure how this whole system is set up. You could chat here, and it'll show up in this little box here. And we'd really love to hear any questions that you might have.
Max, I have a question.
Yes.
It's Richard Chafu in San Diego. How are you and Adam? And hi, Grant.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Dr. Chefu.
Now, I would just echo what Grant said about Influx marketing. We've just, fortunately, through Grant, found them, and they're a tremendous company. Very responsive, forward thinking. So I feel like it'd be part of the Influx team. And, you know, with that being said, one question, Max, is, and you may have already alluded to this in your talk, are there any technologies that Influx has found that are beyond the curve? In other words, that we're not seeing now, that are beyond the horizon? I know Grant's been a big innovator in the aesthetic field for our specialty, and I've always kind of followed his wake, but I wonder if there's anything that you guys have noticed from being experts in the space that you're in that we should all be looking at or embracing, just as we didn't think that COVID-19 would make us all our first meeting in a virtual format, nor would we have thought of telemedicine to the extent that we've thought of. So anything that we should be thinking of as plastic surgeons to think outside of the box, other than what you've given in your excellent presentation.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for piping in and for your kind words. We're very glad to hear you feel that way. That is our goal with every client, is to produce that kind of a response. So that makes us very happy. In terms of technologies, I think, you know, in this white paper that we have, where I mentioned, we talk about what is the next big thing, what are the trends. We have this headline in there where it says the next big thing is all the little things, which isn't necessarily the answer everyone wants to hear, but it really comes down to having all your P's and Q's in a row with all these digital touch points. Right now, there's so many ways that practices can communicate with you that even just having someone in your team who can kind of bring all the, kind of amass all those different communication touch points and make sure that all that response is happening is really important. And there's different technologies for that. I think one of the biggest difference makers and in that, what we're talking about in terms of communication, is, it may sound fundamental, and Adam, you could underscore if you agree, or chime in here if you think anything else. I think the 2 biggest things are putting in technologies for automated lead follow-up. There's a couple different companies that are doing that. MyMed Leads is one, and another is actually Simplast has a they are an EHR, but they have a standalone product that they're just rolling out right now, and it'll be available, I think, within the next few weeks to the general public. And that has within it a lot of features to help you have very organized follow-up. And then the chat feature, there's a company that right now, through that group offering we've put together, is offering, I think it's something like 60 days for free. And there's no conditions. You can just cancel after 60 days if you don't like it. We've partnered with them quite a bit. They're a company called Swell. And the amount of leads that we're seeing that a website would not normally get that are coming through this, because people are willing to just use that. And they don't want to fill out a web form or even pick up the phone. They just want to fill this thing out and say, text me back when you get a chance. And that's how that system works. We're seeing that be a huge difference maker in terms of the lead volume on certain websites. So I think those are my immediate answers. Adam, would you have anything you would add to that?
The only other thing I'll say is that I appreciate the question, Dr. Shefu, and I will say that between Max and I, we actually spend a chunk of time pretty consistently evaluating new technologies. Like Swell, for example, we're bringing it up and mentioning it because we spent a substantial amount of time vetting that product and making sure that we understood that they were pushing more and more into the medical space, and that they were focusing on building their product more and more into that direction, where initially we had first contact with them when they were just kind of like beginning as a startup, and then they really took a course to push into medical, and we've kind of actually helped them push more in that direction, where they're integrating more and more with different technologies, because like Max said, you can have all these disparate systems, but the real thing is getting it so they can all kind of talk to each other, so you can really create a comprehensive system. I'm a firm believer that there's not going to be one product that does everything. I think that companies that specialize in making a specific type of product or filling a void of where there should be a great technology product is the best way to go. But they normally are going to build the best product when they're really focused, and then getting a system where they can all kind of work together in order to really make your practice have all the right tools that you feel is necessary in order to really expand, I think is really important. With that said, we do have some things maybe in the back half of this year that we are going to be launching that relate to our review of certain technology products in the aesthetic space specifically. And we like to, in addition to being a digital marketing company, we do ourselves come from a background of having worked with a number of different startups and having a growth perspective in regards to technology. And so we also have a keen interest in technologies, and that is all spectrums of digital, everything from marketing all the way through to patient retention, automations, things like that. And I think we're going to do a series of additional promotions and talks and breaking down different products as we kind of review them and work with those companies, so that we can actually try to provide a strong guide for everyone as a resource of what those products are before they're kind of even a mainstream thing. So that's the direction we're moving with that in the future.
If anyone else has any other questions, I know that some of the next sessions are starting soon, but we'd love to take questions. You can just turn on your microphone. And if we don't get a chance to answer your question sufficiently here, you can reach myself, Max, at influxmarketing.com, or Adam. Adam is the CEO. He's my boss. We are partners. I'm the chief strategy officer. He is the CEO, but we would love to take anyone's email with just a question, no expectations. We're happy to help. Max at influxmarketing.com, Adam at influxmarketing.com. If we can help you through this time, we'd love to. And if you have any questions right now, feel free to just turn on your mic there. You should have a little button right up here where you can unmute it. And
I will also say, while people are contemplating answering those or asking those last questions in the last few minutes we have, if in the off chance anyone in here is not happy with their current digital circumstance, or if they for some reason don't have a digital team, we are also interested with that Stronger Together promotion that Max mentioned earlier, that campaign, that kind of effort that we're putting together. There are certain discounts that we're offering right now, which we normally never do. And so that's, I think, now through the end of May, and you might be worth checking it out if you are interested or considering any of our services beyond just advice, which we're happy to give to anyone at any time, no matter what.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't hear it earlier, what Adam is referring to is we decided to kind of team up with a bunch of companies that we just have good relationships. We have no official relationships with any of these companies, but we just have good relationships with them, and we decided to team up to help cross-promote some things that would help practices to do more with less, to take this time to implement systems. Maybe right now you've been thinking about redoing your website, and this is a great time to do it. As Adam mentioned, we don't do sales or discounts. The attempt here is more that we want to help practices as much as we can. And each of these companies, you can find out more about it at influxmarketing.com. /stronger has an offer. And then, obviously you got to look at what makes sense for you. What's something you've been looking at implementing or shifting or changing in your processes? One of these companies might fit the bill, and you're going to have a chance to try out their software for 2 months free for the most part on all of these guys and see if it makes sense for you. And we think all these companies are pretty great, so they should make sense. They should make things better in practice. And to your question, Dr. Shafu, a lot of these technologies will help you to put these pieces together. And sometimes it requires a company like ours to help you really get them all tied together, and we can help do that. Does anyone else have any final words or questions here? I see some people are ducking out of here to get to their next session. We don't want you to miss out on your CME. If there's any final questions, just go ahead and turn on your mic, or you can hit up the chat here. Again, a lot of what we're talking about here is covered in these white papers that you can also download on our website at this URL here. And you'll get this whole presentation as well if you're interested in it, if you want to sign up there.
Well, I want to thank you guys. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Influx, and all your wonderful team, Bowie and everybody. It's been a lot of fun working with you guys, and thanks for your support. I'm going to jump off now. Good hearing from you, Richard, and seeing you, Tracy, and Jennifer, and the rest that were on. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks so much, Dr. Stevens. We appreciate
Thanks, everyone.
it. Enjoy the rest of the meeting. Take care now.
Thanks to everyone, and thank you to the Aesthetic Society as well.
Thank you so much for having us be a part of this. We really appreciate it.